Hello, everyone. My name is Ginu Shweri. I am the Film Programs Curator at ArteEast. Thank you for joining us today for this special conversation between filmmaker MOHAMED SOUEID with our guest curator, Giovanni Vimercati. This event is part of the MOHAMED SOUEID Retrospective, co-presented by ArteEast and Anthology Film Archives. This series is part of ArteEast's legacy program, Unpacking the ArteArchive, which preserves and presents over 17 years of film and video programming by ArteEast. In addition to the in-person theatrical screenings at Anthology from March 3rd to 8th, the series will be presented on artearchive.org from March 3 to 13th. For more information, visit artearchive.org. I would like to pass it on and extend a special thanks to Jed at Anthology Film Archives for his tireless efforts in bringing this program together.
So yeah, as Ginu said, I'm Jed Rapfogel. I'm the film programmer at Anthology Film Archives, and I just mostly wanted to say a quick word of hello on behalf of Anthology. As Ginu mentioned, we will be screening the films in person here at Anthology from March 3rd to the 8th. So if you're seeing this before the 8th, I encourage you to come see the films in a theater. Yeah, aside from that, I just want to extend a huge thank you to ArteEast, who we've worked together with a number of times in the past, and I'm extremely happy to be doing so again. To Giovanni for conducting this Q&A, and of course, above all, to MOHAMED SOUEID for allowing us to show his work and to bring it to audiences here in New York City and beyond. And so, yeah, with that, I just wanted to introduce Giovanni Vimercati, who again guest programmed this retrospective and will be appearing right now with MOHAMED for a conversation. Giovanni is currently pursuing a PhD in film and media studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara. His research focuses on the political economy of film and media. For over 10 years, he's worked as a film critic, and his work, often under the pseudonym Celluloid Liberation Front, has appeared in various international publications. He's a member of FAPRESCI, the International Federation of Film Critics, and serves in this capacity on festival juries worldwide. He is currently working on a book on the political history and economy of the film industry in Lebanon. And yeah, with that, I will turn things over to Giovanni and MOHAMED.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Ginu. Thank you so much, Jed, and thank you so much, MOHAMED, for sharing your films with us. A quick introduction for those of you who don't know who MOHAMED SOUEID is. MOHAMED is a video pioneer, a producer, a film critic from Beirut, Lebanon. He has directed over 10 films and was awarded several prizes for his work, including the Best Director Award at the Arab TV Works Festival in Cairo in 1996 for his film Roses of Passions, as well as the Best Documentary Prize at the Beirut International Film Festival in 2000 for Tango of Yearning, which will be shown as part of this retrospective. MOHAMED is also the author of 2 books on cinema, Lebanese films during the Civil War, which was published in 1986, and O Heart, a film autobiography of the late movie theaters of Old Beirut, which was published in 1996. The beautiful thing about this retrospective is that not only it is a showcase of MOHAMED's films, but it's also a little history of cinema in Lebanon, because virtually every film MOHAMED has made contains a little trace or anecdote about the history of cinema in Lebanon. And which I think it's going to be very interesting for, the audience at Anthology Film Archives and beyond, of course, because it's a history that's little known outside of Lebanon, but it's extremely rich and interesting. And what's also very interesting about MOHAMED is that before becoming a filmmaker, before starting making films, he was a cinephile, he was a film critic. So his engagement with film predates actually his, work as a director. And it's precisely with this that I would like to, start asking Mohammed if he can tell us about, the Beirut he came of age in and the kind of films he was able to watch, and if he can talk about, the film culture that there was in Beirut in the late 60s and early 70s, and how that film culture, shaped you as a cinephile and as a filmmaker, and how you, eventually ended up making films.
Okay, thank you, Giovanni. Thank you all, Jed and Gino and Jordan behind the scenes. It's really a pleasure for me to share these moments and talking about the history of cinema and Beirut with the American background and Dubai background. So yes, in the late, actually, I started going to movie theaters when I was 11 years old, precisely. And it was a sin that my father made, and later he regretted it because it changed all my path. But I always go back to the first film I saw. It was a Western movie. And actually, I think it was a B movie, but with a strange end. It was about Americans helping Mexican to get rid of a ruthless ruler. And what was in common between the adventurers and the revolutionaries is that they all seeking there's a fortune hidden somewhere, and they want to get hold of it. And at the end, we found a closet and a safe very close. They put the dynamite and they opened it, and we found a branch of olive. This sense of contentment has been ever since with me in my soul. So from there on, I started to go all by my own, even though I was a little child. That was in late 60s or 1970, something like this. And the downtown, Beirut downtown, became at that time very popular. It has its glamour for the not the aristocrats, but for the middle class and wealthy families, and families as well, as the only gathering place for cultural activities, for cafes, for if you want to buy a book, you have to go to the downtown. So it was like a kaleidoscope for me, not only seeing a movie, but also to find second-hand books, to find many pleasures in this downtown. So I started, and it was dangerous because it was full of lawless people, people who escaped from prison. They used to take refuge in the movie theater, and it was like that. So it was a risk for me to go. I was 11 and then 12 years old, and I became at an early age very addicted to movie theaters, and I watched everything from because also it was we had more than 30 or 32 movie theaters in this little place. They were really cramped, and but every movie theater has at least 800 seats, something like this. It was a huge. So I saw from American movies to Italian movies, Egyptian movies, some Scandinavian production, and it was really very democratic in terms of film distribution. We had two kinds of film distributors, those who represent totally what was called at the time the 7 major studios of Hollywood. They had their official representatives in Beirut. They distribute Hollywood films not only in Lebanon but to the rest of the Arab world and the Middle East. And we had independent distributors who, thanks to them, we had the opportunity to get to know names like Bergman, like Tarkovsky, like I saw a lot of Canadian, Iranian films during the Shah period, and not to mention the French, some German films also at the time. But actually, I was like a movie buff, more. I was ready to accept anything I watch, and I used to write down on a small notebook the synopsis of the films I saw, and I had also the pleasure to paint with my pencil and the posters of the films, and I did this book. This notebook became like a kind. I was like advertising the next shows in Lebanon, but all for myself, not to mention. And I had a special inclination to Arabic calligraphy, so I started to draw the titles of the film with different kind of calligraphies, and I tried to color it with my tools, you know. But actually, in 1972, I guess, I still have the habit to walk all the way from my house to downtown Beirut and to the newly established commercial center in Hamra Street, which has become a kind of competitive place for the old downtown. And actually, the good screening and good programming went to Hamra Street. It was there was what we call not only in Lebanon, wherever you go, salle de film d'art et essai. We had one movie theater specialized in presenting art house films, very well selected films of Russian cinema, Swedish cinema, what else? And so it was really my first experience and my first serious acquaintance with what we call art film, you know, or and to get to learn that behind each film there's a director, you know. And I became fascinated with the idea that all I want to do, not in movies, is to direct films. So usually for an adolescent at that age, people think of becoming actors or something to show off their capabilities. But I was determined that the future I want for myself was to become a filmmaker. That movie theater's art house movie theater was called Clemenceau. And the first film that really took my breath was Andrei Rublev by Tarkovsky. The second film was La Source. It's an Ingmar Bergman film. I don't know, I forgot the name in English, the title in English. But these two films, at the first time, I didn't understand well what was behind, but I felt like seeing a film is not only understanding the story plot, but is to get between the lines and to appreciate the beauty of the scene you are watching, and it's a voyage of ideas and themes. And actually, when I started writing articles, as a film critic, one of the most things I tried always to avoid is to write the story of the film during in the context of my criticism. I tried to make, if you like, another film out of the film I saw. So it was an interpretation of what I saw. And this has, I guess, distinguished my writing on films. There's, apart from movie theaters, I think Beirut was also a hub for film criticism, and it really shaped my knowledge of films and made me distinguish between what is mainstreaming films and what is really what are really the films that put you in the pure meaning of cinema. There were many publications, especially daily newspapers, and it was a kind also of competition between film critics, and they were divided. We had film critics that were they tried to express their leftist opinion, political opinion, through films, and they tried hard to find a political statement behind the film, even if the films were commercial films or mainstream films. And other kind of film critics, who were, and they were few, who were more liberal in their personal opinion, but they encouraged people to love cinema. So I got the passion of films from. There was a well-known film critic who passed away some 20 years ago. He's half Lebanese, half Egyptian, called Samir Nasri. I was really, I followed his articles every time. He was like a critic who gives the reader a chronology of what's happening in our times, the trends that are coming, and he give an adaptation, his own adaptation to terms like film d'auteur, to trends like Nouvelle Vague in France or Czechoslovakia at that time, and little by little, also I was a French reader. I tried to. I bought lots of books on cinema, and I was more fond of. At the time, I used to ask people who travel to United States to bring back for me a magazine like Cineast, American Cineast, and Film Comment, And I read the articles written by Richard Corliss in, I don't know if it's it was in Time or in Newsweek. And I bought a lot of foreign book on cinema, and you can say I'm autodidact, because at the time we didn't have film school. My father couldn't afford to send me abroad to study cinema. He was against the idea, but actually financially we didn't have the means to follow our studies abroad and do like many young people did at wartime. They sent their children to Europe, to the States, to Canada, to follow their education. So I had to fight hard first to look for anything related to film culture. At that time, we didn't have internet. We couldn't share films. But working as a journalist and focusing on films, the festivals gave me good opportunity to get to know people, to get to know films, to hold interviews with with many directors and actors, and it was and there's a third factor, because I mentioned first the movie theaters, second the film criticism movement in Lebanon, and the third factor, which was very important to me, I started to work in commercial Lebanese films. They were low-budget films made during the war. I started as a clapman, and then script continuity, and then assistant director. I had a good opportunity to work on the film from A to Z, from the pre-production phase through the actual shooting of the films, and the post-production. And I spent hours not only in assistant directors in shooting their films, but also in editing their films. And it was I needed that technical knowledge also, and then one day I decided to find my own way. Since and during the war we didn't have lots of film facilities, but the video started to invade the space, and I said to myself, okay, if I cannot get an Arriflex camera to produce my film, then I should use the video as an alternative tool. I bore always in mind that what is essential to me is to show the film language I try to express myself with, even though if it's a video or a film tool. And that's how I started with a personal film called Absence. Actually, it was kind of homage to my auntie. She passed away very young, and it was shot in the last year of the war, and I decided to show how Lebanese missed the meaning of ordinary death among people who were killed during the fight, and so I tried to give kind of respect to death as an absolute mirror of the life after, if you want to put it that way. And it was a good experience for me because I tried to establish. I always love the long shot, the slowness of how we can narrate a film, but at the same time, I tried to find out of the still pictures and the slowness of the rhythm, what was vivid inside this. So I tried to find life within dead pictures, if I can put it that way.
And can I ask you, Muhammad, the fact that you start shooting the film at the end of the war, was it a coincidence or was it for a particular reason?
No, I had two motivations actually. First, I think because I was very close to my auntie and my mother at the same time. I felt I should do something out of the rituals, you know. Second motivation, I was eager to start, and I said to myself, if this year, at that time, if I didn't make the film, it means I will never do filmmaking. I will spend my life as a film critic or journalist, and got bored at the end. At that time, we didn't really know that the war will end. You know, on the contrary, the war escalated in a way that no one believed it will end, because all the factions were deeply involved in massacres, in non-dialogue. Everyone had their idea of what Lebanon we want and what so. But suddenly there was an initiative. It was a kind of tripartite initiative led by the Arab, Saudi Arabia and United States, and Syria at that time. They brought the Lebanese deputies of the old parliament outside Lebanon, and they sealed an agreement to end the war. You know, to end the war.
And
yeah.
Sorry, can I ask you, you know, how throughout your career you dealt with the issue of funding? Because a lot of filmmakers outside the so-called first world sometimes, you know, have to look for funds in either Europe or North America, unless they come from a country with a very strong film industry. I don't know, like India, for example. And a lot, I remember reading an article by this Lebanese professor in France, I believe, where he was telling the story of this Lebanese filmmaker who presented a script to a French producer, and the script began with these two women going out in the evening in Beirut for, you know, a drink, and the producers were like, you know, this is not very believable. You should put in the script that they're accompanied by their cousin or something. And I think it was a very interesting story to see how, you know, filmmakers from the Arab world, but in general, again, from outside the so-called first world, in order to secure money, often they have to, you know, compromise with the stereotypes that willingly or not, you know, producers from Europe and North America project on parts of the world that, you know, they don't really know. And, or for example, how France often, when offers money to produce films, as part of the contract, you have to include a certain amount of dialogue that is in French. So I was wondering if you ever had to deal with this in your career and how you dealt with it.
Actually, I had, and since my early days in filmmaking, because my background was Lebanese local commercial films, but I got a good understanding of the game between producers, distributors, and directors, and I decided it's the same everywhere. I didn't want to make my project a compromised project, or to change something that the producers or the financier would argue about its importance in the market. So I never knocked the door of any either whether a local production company or European or company. And I was more than convinced later about that I made a good choice, because my work in the TV also was a window to know. I produced over 100 hours of documentaries, and I was in line with the major producers with the broadcasters, independent producers. So I knew how a script can suffer from what you see eventually is not what was written for. This is the game. You have to accept it or not. And I was lucky. The TV I worked with, they were very understanding to my sensibility to things, and I managed actually to produce 3 or 4 films that I can really feel they are in line with my But back to your question, maybe I should put you in a historical timeline of how the European, especially, and the Lebanese became both involved in the so-called co-production itinerary, because the relationship between the West and Lebanon has changed a lot from the 50s until the late 80s and early 90s. First, the West was accustomed to come to Lebanon to use it as a background for spy films, especially after, during the Cold War and after the success of James Bond series. Actually, not even Lebanon and Italy, and even I saw a couple of Swedish films that were inspired by the Cold War, and they filmed part of their films in Lebanon. So the professional relationship was based on the following. We as Americans, as French, as Italians, will come to Lebanon to use its beautiful scenery as a place for it. And you, as Lebanese, you can provide us with technicians, with assistants, and that's it. Not a single talk was about joining effort to co-produce a film with Lebanese talents but thanks to that also, you have first generation of film technicians that were the West productions in Lebanon was to them a kind of apprenticeship. They became later technicians. Some of them were good technicians. The same happens with the Egyptian also. The Egyptian came during Nasser era because they flew Egypt after the nationalization of industry and made films in Lebanon. More than 100 films were made between the 60s and early 70s. Again, the Egyptians, the difference between the Egyptians and the Western producers is that the Egyptians used Lebanese money to produce their own films with Egyptian stars and supportive actors from Lebanon. And but also it created a second generation of film technicians and assistant directors who worked closely with the Egyptian. And during the war, because everybody left Lebanon, Lebanese became independent, and what they learned from Americans and Europeans who visited Lebanon and from the Egyptians, the assistant directors became directors. The camera operator became the main cinematographer, and that's how things. The idea of proposing films to French production companies, for example, it wasn't really the vague, what should I say? It wasn't à la mode before late 80s. And I think because the French, for instance, they didn't create funds for non-French films, by the time, it was, I think, during the François Mitterrand era that the socialists became interested in opening the support and the fund for basically the French-speaking, the Francophonie, the French-speaking. They opened the door to all the countries that were previously under the French mandate or colonized by the French. And from here, at the beginning, it wasn't, we didn't have, by the late 80s, we didn't have lots of filmmakers, actually. When I started filmmaking, there were, I can say, 4 or 5 filmmakers that were involved in films. Now you have maybe more than 100 filmmakers because Lebanon in the 90s started to have film schools, audiovisual, and it went on. It was organized, this process, during the 90s and beginning of 2000. So what you mentioned about having a dialogue, if you have half of the dialogue in French, you can get full funding. It depends on the percentage of the French language used in the film. Your budget or financial support, the percentage of the financial support depends on how much French dialogue you have beside your original language. And of course, you have the editorial line, what we call editorial line. For instance, okay, if you want to, if you want us to produce your film, the money we are investing comes from it's the French people money, the taxpayers, and they want to see something related to them. So you have to include French character in the film, and so it was kind of. I didn't feel it. If it comes to me, I prefer not to make films than going through this process. I know sometimes A filmmaker is seething inside because he or she wants desperately to make a film, and it's not easy. You can single-handedly write a book every 1 year, 2 years, but producing a film, you have to wait 5. Some people wait 10 years to make another film. So I understand the need to do to make a film, but okay, it all depends on where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve. In movie world, there's a place for everything. You can be film maker. I don't know. If you want to make action films, you have a place. If you want to make art house films, you have a place. But people usually are very weak before two things. First is they want to be recognized, and they want to they want to be known among what we call in France le grand public, the big public. There's a path you can go. Yeah. And believe me, it's easy. It's not if you decide to do what pleases other, you can do it. We are, after all, we are performers, we are entertainers. You can do it, but at what price? This is the question. And actually, I guess this is, I heard it in one old film. If you lose money, you don't lose anything. But if you lose your character, you lose everything. This is, I believe, and you have to decide whether you want to do what you want. This is one thing. And to fight to do what you want, it's another thing. So this is the path I took.
Okay, and also there's something about your films I really like is that they are often personal, but they are never, self-obsessed. Like you manage to speak about, yourselves and your passions, but through the voice of others. And I like how a lot of your films, we get to learn things about you and your cinema, but through others. And I think you're a very good interviewer of people. So I wanted to ask you more about, how you work with the people you work with, because I think that, again, you can see on the screen these very interesting and genuine exchanges between you and the interviewees. And again, they are often personal, but they always exceed, your own subjectivity. So I want to ask you how you work with people and how you manage to get on screen these exchanges and, this like overcoming of your own subjectivity.
Yeah. When now documentary is something trendy wherever you go, and when I started to teach documentaries at Lebanese at San Joseph University, where I still give some master class from time to time, I noticed at the beginning that people hated documentaries because of they thought this is the wrong idea. I think people have that it's doing an interview, is holding an interview with somebody, and it's a Q&A. Okay, after all, what you film is not what you edit. You can leave out the question and try to but I think interviews are for documentaries or some kind of essay films I'm interested in. Interview is a skeleton of the film you are going to build, and I tried not to be governed by the interview. I mean, okay, an interview is a kind. I took the interview as a tool for your narrative, but it's not a script for me. I cannot edit the film according to what question becomes first and what question becomes. This is the basic technical understanding of the primitive understanding of the interview tool. But what I'm always fascinated by people. I'm not that social person, and I only get social when I embark on a film. When I choose a person to include in my films, I try to first of all to see what is in common between me and him or her, and to what extent that person is my alter ego in some way, and I try my best not to impose myself or questions. My strategy is, okay, I don't start from the sensitive question to the simple. I go step by step, and if this person refuses to ask, I leave it. I take usually from. I come to when I shoot a film, I don't have a script in my hand, not a list of questions I want to ask, just like sitting with him in a comfortable set, and I do my best also not to make him feel there's a camera, or I work with one or two persons maximum. Nightfall, I did it myself, all from A to Z. I had a friend of mine who was assistant, because at that time you have tripod to put, and there are things you cannot handle on your own. And I don't, and I make him feel that time is open. If the interview doesn't succeed, okay, the importance is my relationship with that person. And I leave him speak, and I take the question actually from the answers of, so it's like I try to make myself getting to know him, not actually. And believe me, sometimes in the interview, there are passages that make you reconsider what was in your mind, even change the course of the film. But to me, the most important thing is to go to the extreme. The most important interview I made were no less than 7-8 hours of recording, and I try to get exhausted and get the other person exhausted, because after exhaustion, the idea that I want to finish, okay, I start as a generous person with him. I have no problem with time. I have no problem with how many gigabyte I will record. Even though I have also a crew who will get exhausted at the end. And eventually, the person became generous with me. So it's a kind of trust building process. It works. Sometimes it doesn't work. I interviewed people who were, they don't have the grace to speak or to express themselves, or they are, But what is amazing, those people who stuttered or who suffer in answering in full sentences, they usually are the incentive for me to be creative in the editing. They give you the full stop, the full stop of the thing. And editing, it's the real process of writing, especially for documenting. And during the editing, I try to go through the poetic actually what I choose in editing, I take out from the interview the moment that my character you don't believe that he's answering a question or he's practicing a role or he's acting a scene. I do my best in the interview to turn the answer into a kind of a monologue that any actor would love to do it before a screen or on the stage. It's not. This is the most difficult thing in the execution of my project.
Great, thank you. And can I ask you, because you started working for Tele Liban, which is like a Lebanese TV station in the early 90s, and
Yes.
you've done a lot of work for TV, and yet you can see in every of your film, the authorial mark, so to speak, your own voice and your own vision. So I wanted to ask you about your experiences working for TV and how, because we associate work commissioned by TV as being more like standardized and more in line with the TV editorial line than with the director that's making the film. But I feel in your case that, your films are still very personal and are still very much your own films, even though they were produced for TV. So I wanted to ask you about, your experiences working for TV.
I had a painful but wonderful experience at Tele Liban, which was state TV. And when I started to work there, they were revamping the TV because after the war, the TV was very weak. They didn't have resources a lot. But I was lucky to work with the general manager, the appointed general manager at the time. He was an intellectual, and actually he was the partner of Maroon Baghdadi in his early works. So he said to me, "Look, we don't have money, but I can give you camera and crew and do whatever you want." And he was really sincere and truthful because I did what I want. And I used the platform to create personal films, to produce essays, to even to tackle what was looked upon at the time like taboos. I made that film Cinema Fuad on the sexual identity of a transvestite, and it was banned by the censorship, but it was so for those who work in the TV. My work was kind of scandalous to them, but I was supported by my general manager, and I was supported also by some press previews, and it worked. It worked for me. I don't know. I tried to give something different from what people usually see, and but it wasn't going to be sustainable because actually politically the TV had another crisis. It was closed, and I was jobless after that, and all the TVs in the Arab world, especially in Lebanon, they usually follow the publicity agents, and they are the real programmers, and they don't want something unusual to be done because in the prime time, So it was against the TV identity, but it was a pleasure. And it was. In some way, it was at the top of the town because they found it strange, and it's something chaotic, and but it created the shock. I wasn't seeking the shock, but the result was a shock. Was a shock, and the general manager was satisfied because he wanted that shock. So there was two kinds of interest. The general manager wanted a shock, and I felt, or I thought, in an innocent way, that there's a room for you to give something different, to alternate. After all, what I found out, TV has different codes. You have to, and habits. It's TV. It's something that make people people addicted to habits, and it's felt in the way they are. The habit of watching talk shows, the habit of creating sitcoms. So you see, there's a kind of recipe, and they don't want to change it. If you play with the codes of habit, this will become first dangerous to your career, and second, because they can simply say, "Okay, thank you and goodbye." That's why after that, I said, if I want to do my own work, I should remain an underground filmmaker. I try to get little fund to make. And actually, to be honest with you, when I decided to produce and make my film, it was for me a personal need, and I really didn't think of finding distributor or getting my films shown everywhere. Just to be satisfied and to fill my soul mainly.
And can I ask you about your last film, because the Insomnia of a Serial Dreamer? Because there are several sections of the film that I presume are material that you filmed in the past. So I was wondering how this new film came to be, and why did you go back to the past and include stuff from the past into your latest film, and what were the motivations that brought you to do this?
The motivation was that the last 18 years, I started to, there was a kind of boom in images, and after with the YouTube and other platforms, it has become the democratization of cinema. Was on one hand was was beautiful because everybody feels that they can do films. But on the other hand, it has put creating an image. It will put you in a dilemma. What is the image I want to show amidst these tons of images that you watch every day? And so I was prudent about what film I want to, but I throughout 18 years I filmed many idea I had in mind, but there was no connection between them. And it started with the PD-150 camera, and then to the HD, and then and in between the Betacam HD, and I finished with my iPhone. So I had 18 years of footage, and one day I said I need to make a film. So I went back to them. I started to view them again and converting the format of that. And after many viewing, I found out that the basic idea was to create, to produce a film telling based on an anecdote. I'm a sleepless person. I need for people to tell me stories like a baby bedtime story, so that to sleep. And it was like the background thread that helped me to not to assemble these images, but to get out of them a film. It is true that it was shot during 18 years, but it can be seen as a film produced recently, So because I decided from the beginning, I don't like, there are lots of films that they were shot on different phases, but usually they are being edited in a chronological order, or they say 1970, 1960, I decided from the beginning to avoid the time factor, and to see film within not. I didn't like to put it in definite time, or it's just the difference in time between the beginning and the end. It can only be felt by the people who contributed to the film, because they can see themselves 10 years ago and now. But I think the unity of time was essential to me when I made this film. And it took me more than 1 year and a half to edit it, but eventually I came to. I made the film I would love to make and watch myself. And
Great.
Our life are bits and pieces,
Okay, thank you so much, Mohammed. I think we are done with time. I
Okay.
believe. But if there is anything you would like to add and to tell, those who are gonna attend your retrospective, please feel free.
I like that my films will be seen in with love. It is important to me not to watch the film and understand Lebanese reality or something like this, because the dailies can be seen everywhere. But to me, watching a film, it's just the pleasure of feeling things and feeling the feeling. It's I like to watch them, and to me, it is not a must that that they understand the story plot of these films. You know, and to me, it's just if they can catch up with the film feelings. This is, I think, I will be grateful.
Great. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your films with us. I'm very jealous of all those that are gonna, discover your films for the first time. And I think that's it. And enjoy the films. Go and watch them. You can watch them in person at the Anthology Film Archives. If you're
Okay.
not in New York, you can watch them online. And yes, thanks everyone. Thanks again, Anthology Film Archive, for hosting. Thanks, ArteEast, Ginu and Beth, for making this possible. And yes, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.